Joining us the panel, Michael Kroger, former Victorian Liberal President, Steve Conroy, former Labor Senator and Cabinet Minister. Michael, the question I now hear being asked is, what is this Labor government really for? What's its big plan?
Well, it's a very good point. It doesn't have a big plan. The decay started with The Voice, where it was offside with the majority of Australians. That seemed to have taken the wind out of the government. Ever since then, they've been on a downward trajectory. He's offside with the Australian public in relation to immigration. He's offside with them in relation to nuclear. He's offside with the Australian community in relation to the Middle East and Israel. He's got no idea what to do about the cost of living crisis because all he does is massively spend. Every time you read about the Labor government, they're spending 10 billion there, a billion here, 20 billion, all these schemes, all adding to inflation, all keeping interest rates high, etc., etc. He's in a world of pain. He's like a punch-drunk boxer. He doesn't know where to go or what to do. And as I've said for many weeks now, Peter Dutton is favourite to win the election, and quite rightly so, Andrew.
Well, I thought when Laura Tingle in the Financial Review grudgingly admitted he was looking more the goods through gritted teeth, I thought that's a turnip. Stephen, you won't agree with much of that assessment, but how do you think? You can't be pleased with how the government's finishing the year, or in fact finishing its term?
Well, I think, I mean, you did mention it, but the win, particularly over the Greens and, you know, their friends, the Liberals that they keep voting with in Parliament on the housing package, is actually a very big signature win for the Albanese government. I mean, this is a package that has been stalled for over a year. This is a package that could have begun to start delivering some housing around the country. You know, there's lag times on that, obviously, but, you know, starting a year later than you should have means that, you know, more Australians are not going to have accessibility to housing. So I think this is a big, big win. And the Greens, you know, are starting to panic about their own electoral prospects. You have to see setbacks in Queensland, setbacks in the ACT, setbacks in Victoria and their own council areas. So I think the Australian public are starting to wake up to the threat and the fundamental anti-Semitism and the violent protests and the supporting organisations like the CFMEU riddled with bikie gangs and organised crime. I mean, this is not a pretty picture for the Greens. So I think it's an important win for the government. But in terms of an election was held today, they would certainly be a minority government, I think, from either party. I still think Labor are more likely to do it. I'm not quite as bullish as Michael on Peter Dutton. I still think that Labor are in position to have at least minority. There are some in the government that think that there's still a pathway to a majority government, but they need to have a cracking next 4 or 5 months if they were going to be able to retain majority government.
Yeah, and of course one of those months, maybe 2, is the summer break where you don't get much traction. Dragging down Michael, as a fellow Victorian, dragging down the whole country now is Victoria, which has been called a poor state now by economist Saul Eslake. I was shocked to hear this. For the first time, Victoria is poorer than even Tasmania, if you judge by how much each person produces or can spend their disposable income. And the state debt, of course, is more than the debt of New South Wales and Queensland combined. What's going on?
Well, basically, you've had a Labor government here in Victoria drunk on debt. They've learnt nothing from Labor governments in the past who've spending well beyond our capacity to pay. They've dramatically increased taxes on property as their only way of getting out of this mess. They've basically made Victoria an economic basket case. I mean, our state debt will be more than 200 billion in 3 years' time. You know, so the state Liberals, if and when they come in a couple of years' time, there's nothing to sell. Victorians are going to be saddled with this debt for a generation. So that's basically what happened. You know, they've learnt nothing from the spending, you know, of the Kane-Kerner years, the overspend, and to be up to the Liberal Party to clean up this as usual. Let's hope they can, and let's hope that, you know, the 4 or 5 federal seats in Victoria that could jettison Peter Dutton into office in his own right won. And that very much depends on what happens here electorally, Andrew.